Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
Federal employees often retire with two advantages many Americans don't have: a steady pension and a sizable TSP. But when required minimum distributions kick in, those income streams can collide, triggering higher taxes and unexpected ripple effects. We'll look at how that happens and why planning years ahead can change the outcome with Thiago Glieger of RMG Advisors. Thiago, thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Terry.
We have an interesting topic today, required minimum distributions, or RMDs. It's really important to a lot of people. Start us off with that definition first.
Yeah, Terry, required minimum distributions, people tend to not worry too much about it because they know it's something that is later in retirement, usually 73, 75 years old, depending on when you were born, is when RMDs start. So people come up to retirement, especially early feds at MRA, and they're thinking, I've got 20 years almost before I need to worry about this. What do I need to think about it for now? And so the RMD stands for required minimum distribution. And the challenge with that is that there's a minimum amount of money that has to come out of your portfolio at some point. And usually that's by the time that you already have a fully taxable pension. Your Social Security is already turned on in most cases by that point. Actually, in pretty much all cases, nobody defers past 70, right? So now you've got all this taxable income, and now the tax law says you got to start making these minimum distributions, which just add to your tax. So tax on tax on tax is the problem we're trying to solve for here. And it catches people by surprise by the time they get into their 70s.
So this is both a lifetime tax issue and a legacy planning issue then.
That's right. I think when RMDs are in our lifetime, they can be pretty manageable. But recently, within the last 5-6 years, there was a law change that said new people that are non-spouses, so any of your kids, inheriting money that's inside a pre-tax account, you don't have the same amount of time that you used to have before to completely distribute the account. The new rule says now you have to take it out, in most cases, within 10 years. And so thinking about a shorter timeline, you have a taxable account, now you have a shorter timeline that you have to deplete that account to zero. That means you got to take bigger chunks out of it. And never mind if the market keeps increasing that account balance, because the markets keep growing over time, you keep having to take more and more and more out in bigger chunks, and bigger chunks equals more taxable income. And again, before you know it, you're facing this big tax bomb, and you could have done something about it way sooner if you had the chance.
It seems like a lot of feds see a large TSP balance as a success story, and it is, but then it can actually turn into a long-term tax penalty. Walk us through how that math works.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Having a big savings account, an investment account, can be financially freeing to people. It buys a lot of financial independence. But if we think about the traditional wisdom in financial planning and wealth management is defer your taxes. Why pay tax today when you can pay tax tomorrow? This is something that's very common as knowledge. And so as those accounts get bigger and bigger and bigger, the minimum amounts of money that have to come out also get bigger. And if none of those dollars have been taxed yet, that means every dollar you pull out, it's like you're creating your own salary again. And so a $500,000 TSP account, all pre-tax, how much of that is your money compared to how much of that belongs to the IRS and your state comptroller as taxes? Now look at $1 million account, look at a $2 million account. How much more tax do those people really are going to have to owe in their lifetime? And so that's where you start to introduce new problems, first world problems, let's be real, right? But problems nonetheless, because your tax bill just continues to get bigger and bigger. And as you get through larger and larger income brackets, now more of that money is being taxed as well. And it becomes out of control really quickly.
So that's what you referred to a minute ago as the tax bomb. Is there a way that people can plan now to keep this from becoming a problem?
Yes. As long as you are not looking at large RMDs a couple of years away, there's a lot that you can do in what I call your tax planning window. So if you think about what happens to the income trajectory, as somebody is working, usually people earn more and more and more and more. And by the time they retire, they usually are in their highest earning years. Then they retire and their income goes to nothing until their pension kicks in, and then it's a smaller amount of their salary. And unless they're withdrawing from their portfolio in pre-tax accounts, that's their taxable income. Then Social Security kicks in, but truthfully, it's not nearly as high as what they likely earned when they were working. Eventually, their RMDs mean they have to pull out enough that it does increase their bracket again. But if you think when they retire all the way through when RMDs start, you have low income years for 10, 15 years where you can do things like Roth conversions and say, okay, if I'm going to be required to take it out at the 22 or 24% bracket later in my lifetime, maybe I have an opportunity to take it out at the 12% bracket today. And you can save yourself a lot of tax by doing that conversion now, thinking about how much do I want to take? If you're not going to convert, maybe just take a little bit more because you have a little extra room in your tax bracket today, where in the future, the expected RMD is going to be higher.
I'm speaking with certified financial planner Thiago Glieger of RMG Advisors. Thiago, talk a little bit more about that tax planning window for federal employees. How do people know they're in it?
The way to know that you are approaching the tax planning window is to look at what your expected taxable income is going to be for the year. Okay, so if you're leaving federal service and you're not working anywhere else, your bracket, your taxable income is probably very low. Now you need to live, right? And so we still have expenses. So how much are you going to pull out of your TSP account and your other accounts that you have? And is that more taxable income than you were earning as a salary? If the answer is no, it's not, it's less taxable income, then that usually means it's a good idea to start thinking about a Roth conversion. Because if you just don't use the money, you just leave it growing and growing, eventually you run into that required minimum problem, and now your tax is all the way back up again. So that window after you retire and leave federal service, if you go to work for another job, depends on how much you're earning, right? If you're earning the same thing as you were in federal service, okay, that window is not yet started.
RMDs don't just affect taxes, though. As you're talking about raising your income level by pulling this money out of your TSP, they can also change how much your Social Security is taxed and what you pay for Medicare. Help us understand those implications.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Terry. The Social Security taxation is a little different than how our W-2 wages are taxed. Some people pay 0% on Social Security. Some people pay 50% tax on Social Security. Some people pay tax on 85% of their Social Security and everywhere in between. And so the key to understanding how does your RMD affect everything else is if you are increasing your taxable income, you could be increasing it beyond a certain limit that the IRS says, okay, now we're going to tax more of your Social Security benefit. And so now it's not just more tax on the money that the RMD created, it's more tax on your Social Security benefit. And there's also a component to health insurance as well. FEHB does mean that you don't have to take Medicare Part B. You can maintain it if you're eligible in federal retirement, but still most federal retirees take Part B in retirement. That comes with a premium, and that premium is adjusted on your gross income. So the more taxable income you have, the higher your health insurance premiums are. And remember that RMDs just create more taxable income for you. So this whole thing is very interconnected in retirement.
It is pretty complex. For people who don't need that RMD income right now, what are the smartest moves and maybe the most common mistakes you've seen people make?
I think some of the smartest moves is to start sooner in determining what your expected tax bracket is going to be when you do have RMDs. Because you can start to think, okay, am I in a higher bracket today, early retirement, than I'm expected to be when those RMDs begin? And if I'm in a higher bracket then I really need to start thinking about Roth conversions today in the lower bracket that I'm in. Now, using the money you can take it out via a Roth conversion where it just becomes a Roth and then it's tax-free forever. Or you can just distribute that money to yourself. But to your point, if you're not going to use it, maybe there's some philanthropy goals that you might have. For folks who are 70 and a half years old, you can send that money straight to a charity. Instead of writing yourself or writing a check to the charity, you can send it straight out of your IRA.
I've been speaking with certified financial planner Thiago Glieger of RMG Advisors. Thiago, thanks as always for the practical advice.
Thanks, Terry. Glad to be here.
We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts.